You're listening to the Into the Woods podcast with your hosts, Dermot and Michael. Let's get into it.
Wonderful chase by Hinshaw.
Cox again. I cannot believe it. Dacos nearly runs out of room. He's goal!
Jamie Elliott has won the game of footy for this famous club.
Slap for Nick Dacos. He's going to be the hero. The little champ is going to pick the winner.
Here's the Degoe moment. He unloads. Bang! You need your stars. And Collingwood stars just went and wrenched the cup back.
Welcome to this bonus episode of Into the Woods. I'm your host Dermot, and for the next hour or so, we'll be talking about all things Anzac Day. If you want to join the conversation, be sure to follow our socials. You can find us on X at Into the Woods Pod and on Instagram at Into the Woods Pod 10. Once again, I'm joined by Michael. How are you, Mick?
Yeah, good, thank you. But bonus episode's funny. It's like you're suggesting it's a treat of some type.
It is. We've got a lot of diehard fans out there, Mick. They're excited to hear us twice in a week.
Right. Well, for those who may have missed last week, the quickest of summaries, the very quickest of summaries, if you would indulge me for a moment. Dermot, ending the show. This is a quote from Dermot. Adam Uze playing Noah effing Bolter, that loser. Good coaching, Adam Uze. Good coaching. 2 hours later, Uze had masterminded a win over Gold Coast, and who was best on ground? Noah Bolter. Thank you. That's
but you know, culturally, it's not good for them.
I don't think you were coming from quite that angle, Dermot. It was more of your fantasy football nonsense.
It was an absolute joke.
I've now officially put the kibosh. I've warned you in the past in relation to fantasy football being mentioned on this podcast. I've officially put the kibosh on it now. We're not to ever speak of it. This isn't the forum.
I will continue to talk about my fantasy team. But yeah, well, what we didn't know at the time was we recorded that before the Gold Coast Richmond game, and I think everybody just assumed the Suns were going to get up and win. But no, the Tigers caused that upset and went out top of the ladder. So catch us if you can.
Yes, sure.
The mighty Pies.
So what are we doing today?
All right. So basically, last night I was laying there in my Airbnb and I was watching Andreas's live stream with his Essendon mates talking about Anzac Day, and I just thought to myself, well, we missed a bit of a trick. I think we didn't talk. Well, we didn't talk about the Anzac Day, the lead up to Anzac Day at all. So I thought, well,
I rang you up. Sorry to interrupt. I rang you up and said, or I texted you and said, we really should be doing a bit more of a preview of the following week. We always forget to do that because none of our stuff is really scripted very much. And sometimes we forget the bleeding obvious, like who we're playing next week and who we think is going to win. So we should become a little bit more disciplined. And then that's when you kind of suggested, why don't we do this?
Yeah, well, this game in particular, because it's the biggest home and away game of the year. Like, there's no debate about that. And I just felt like, I thought, oh, shit, like, we stuffed up. We should have talked about it. But then I thought, well, I'm not at work at the moment. I'm on my long service. I've got time. So if we can find a bit of time for you, then maybe we can bring out this bonus episode. So basically what we'll do is we'll just talk... We'll talk about the history, I guess, of Anzac Day and our feelings towards certain games, certain moments, just everything Anzac Day in the last 30 years. This is the 30-year anniversary of Anzac Day. And then we'll end the podcast with a bit of a preview towards this upcoming week in this game.
But this is going to be this is a quick pod. This is 20, 30 minutes we're talking.
Oh, that's what I said to you last night. I feel like it might just be a normal length episode, but we'll see how we go.
All right, well, start.
All right, so Anzac Day. So for me, Anzac Day is easily the most important game of the year. I know outside of finals, it is the biggest and most important game of the year. I know it's just the 4 points at the end of the day, but it's so much more than that. Like I grew up here in Melbourne. Obviously, we moved to Tasmania in 2006 when I was about 12. But before then, I remember going to many Anzac Day games with you. You took me along to Anzac Day, and a lot of my memories of going to games as a child was on Anzac Day, and you know
You know,
I
do not get emotional, okay? This podcast isn't for fantasy football, nor is it to have an emotional journey, okay? You got a tendency to do that sometimes, Dermot. And it's quite cringy. Keep on going there.
trust me, I'm not getting emotional.
Like,
But I just to me this game means so much more than the 4 points. And looking back on this game, so what is it now? So yeah, we've played 29 Anzac matches. We lead the battle 17-10 with 2 draws. A bit of a breakdown of these games. So after the draw in 1995, we won the next 3 games. And then after that, Essendon went on this huge winning streak. They won 6 of the next 7 Anzac matches. And to me, when I was reading that, when I was doing my research, I thought that makes a lot of sense because I despise this club. I hate Essendon. Like, I hate Carlton, especially in the last couple of years. The rivalry's really sort of heated up again. And a lot of that's to do with the online battle with the Carlton supporters, Dacos v Cripps, all this sort of stuff. I hate Geelong because I grew up watching them beat us in big finals, prelims, grand finals. But the first team I ever hated, I had this strong burning just hatred towards Essendon. And it doesn't make any sense because most of my life they've been crap. Like I was about 5 years old when they won in 2000. So but this makes sense because Anzac Day means so much to me, and we went to see them a lot in my early childhood. The fact that they won 6 out of 7, it makes sense why I hate them now. But luckily, since then, since 2006, we've dominated. We've won 13 to their 4 since 2006, and then of course last year's draw been in there as well. I guess we'll take a look back at a few of the past Anzac Day games. And we'll start with the 1995 draw, the first one. Now, obviously, I can't talk too much about it. I was one. I feel like last year we spoke in the lead up to Anzac Day about this game in particular. But back, we're about 10 episodes into our podcasting careers or whatever you want to call it. So there was basically no listeners at that point. Do you want to tell us what you were doing in 1995? And I guess what you're doing on the day. Did you go to the game to begin with?
well, it's to my eternal regret that I didn't go to the game. There's a bit of a story behind it. So I had intended going to the game, okay, being Anzac Day, a public holiday. I was in real estate at the time, okay, and mid-morning got a phone call from a purchaser who'd already purchased the house. So I chatted to him a couple of times, made an offer, was accepted, and he rings me up on Anzac Day. He says, "Oh, can I have another look through the house this afternoon?" And for some unknown reason, so public holiday, I'm not working, want to go to the football, but I agreed to take him, and I missed the game as a result. I got to watch the game, but I didn't have enough time to get there after I'd taken him. And I've forever shaken my head over that decision. Missed one of the great games of all time. But yeah, I have a good recollection of that game. Like, obviously, Rocker, as we all know, he loved playing on Fletcher. He went on, I think he kicked 6 a couple of years later on Anzac Day, and then another 7. And on a non-Anzac Day match against them, I remember he had 10 shots a goal on Fletcher and kicked 2-8. I was at that game. So he loved playing on Fletcher. And of course, but look, this game's well documented. People who weren't alive at the time, they know about this game. So I'm not going to tell them anything they don't already know. But the criticism for Buckley, that came for Buckley at the end, where he was kind of running through 50, and a lot of people said he should have had a shot, and he went to pass to Sav. That ball would have been smothered. He had too much front on pressure. It would have either been smothered, or he probably wouldn't have made the distance because he would have had to have kicked over the guy running in, number Grenville, I think it was. So, they're my recollections of the day that I stupidly didn't go. That would have been a great game. Whether I would have got in is another thing, because being 94,500 whatever, and they weren't expecting that. They
were lining up out on the streets, weren't they? There was a lockout. They couldn't all get in.
Yeah, I think they would have had they been organised. They could have easily fitted in. They probably would have topped 100. From what I understand at the time, from what I was hearing. So, look, I might not have even been able to get in anyway, as it turns out. They're my recollections of the game. I'm just trying to think, going in, neither side was neither side? Oh, look, I shouldn't really try to reminisce because I can't remember. I don't think either side were flying at the time coming into it. But, So that's my recollection of the game. But I think I went the following year to 96, and then I continued to kind of go from that point. I remember can I move on from that game? I don't.
Yeah, go on.
I think one of the most incredible crowds I've ever been in. I've been to a few grand finals, so over 100,000, and a number of finals. The craziest crowd I've ever been in was the 92,000. Hawthorn versus Collingwood at Waverley in 81. Now, Waverley held 77,000, but there was 92 in the ground. That's after that they introduced health and safety regulations because I was standing in the aisle. That's the most incredible crowd I've ever been in. But I took you to one of the Anzac Day matches, and there was 85,000 there, and it was pelting rain the whole day. I don't know if you remember it.
It would have been the Mark McGough day, wouldn't it?
I was trying to think the other day. I don't think it was. I think it I think it might have been a bit later. And the reason it was incredible was because it had been pelting the whole day. It wasn't just like the rain hit us unexpectedly. The crowd turned up knowing it was pelting. And I think we won fairly comfortably. But, So there you go. The 85,000, that was an incredible crowd that day, given the conditions. Do you want me to keep on talking?
We'll move on. So we'll move forward to 2009, which wasn't a great day for the club. We were at that game. We flew over from Tasmania for that game. It was the unlosable. What were we? 3 goals up, 5 minutes left. Something like that. I haven't actually looked at the replay and the highlights for quite a while. But then enter David Zaharakis. Kicks the winning goal with probably 10 seconds left. A bit of a backstory to that is when we were about 3 goals up with 5 minutes to go, the Essendon fans were walking out, and Michael, as he does, he's standing up and he's waving to them, "See ya, bye, see you later, bye." Anyway, they come back, they win the game, and the Essendon supporters started. The ones that stayed were getting stuck into you. Although, wouldn't you hate to be one of those Essendon fans that missed one of the greatest endings to an Anzac Day ever? But it wasn't a good game. It wasn't a good day. It sticks out a lot. There's a few things that stick out to me when it comes to Anzac matches, in terms of the bad moments. And for me, I remember Jimmy Hurd just absolutely tearing us apart multiple times. I remember bloody Andrew Lovett, not just the game that he won the Anzac medal in. I think that might have been 04 or 05 or something. He played a lot of good games against us, Andrew Lovett, just breaking the lines through to midfield. He used to give me nightmares. And then there's this moment, the David Zaharakis match winner. And I also, from that day, just remember Paddy Ryder kicking a really big goal. He won the medal that day after David Hill went down with an ACL. And when David Hill went down, we thought, we've got this in the bag. Because at that point, Paddy Ryder had never really rucked before. He was more of a centre-half back. That was fairly early in his career. And that was his breakout performance. That after that, for the rest of his career, he was pretty much a ruckman. So, bad memories, but also at the same time, kind of funny thinking about you waving goodbye to the crowd. And it was also raining that day as well. What are your memories from that?
Yeah, pretty strong. Well, to begin with, I was raised right. I was just exchanging pleasantries with my Essendon friends as they departed. Just common decency. The Zaharakis goal, sometimes you just get a sixth sense, and I knew an Essendon goal was coming. I just knew it was going to come. So it was no surprise that it did come. I think they had it locked in their forward line for what seemed a couple of minutes, and it was just felt inevitable. I don't know if it was my Collingwood pessimism, being a middle-aged Collingwood supporter who's seen a lot of heartache, but I just felt it was coming. But that was the game, wasn't it? A lot of these Anzac Day matches, they start to merge a bit with me. But I'm correct in saying that was the game where Anthony Rocker was at full forward, playing on Fletcher. He outbodied Fletcher because he was just too strong for Fletcher, took the mark, ran into the open goal as the umpire's whistle went, and Rocker was quite rightly assumed he was paying the mark. So he's gone on and he's kicked the goal, kicked it into the grandstand. That was the sealer. The game was over. Not only didn't he pay the mark, he paid the free kick to Fletcher and he paid the 50-metre penalty. No feel for the game at all. Mate, you got freaking 90,000 people there. You're blowing the whistle. You expect Rocket to know what your decision is just from that when he took a clear mark. So anyway, he was ripped off there. They got the 50, and I think that's when they locked it in their forward line. Fletcher took it down, and the Zaharakis goal eventually came, was my fuzzy memory. But, I was freaking tipping. Bloody umpires.
You're correct. That was that same game. I mean, that might have... It didn't... That wasn't the... I think they did kick a goal from that, but it might have been the first of the 3 goals or something like that. One of us should have probably watched the highlights to these games before we started talking about them. But I'm pretty sure that sort of kick-started their comeback. It wasn't the Zaharakis moment, though.
Right, no, but what I'm saying is that goal would have sealed it for Collingwood.
Yeah, it was in the last quarter. It would have put us 3 or 4 goals up, I think, from memory.
I think Leon Davis, who was playing I think he might have been playing wing that day. He was playing further off the
midfield. He was inside mid that day.
Yeah, was he? Yeah, I remember him running around, and he had played a good game that day, and he kicked it into Anthony from memory. And you mentioned Hurd, and there was one particular game, like he's won the medal 3 times. Great player, Hurd. But one of the medals, I remember they were 24 points up at 3/4 time. The game was done. Hurd's come out and he's kicked 5 in the last, I'm pretty sure. 4 or 5 goals in the last when the game was done. And they've given him the medal. Well, the game was over. So that's one of the medals I don't think he should have got.
Well, who should have won it? Do you remember?
I don't know. I can't recall. But he did always damage after the game had been won. So,
am I right in saying, though, that he should have won it in 2001 when Chris Tarrant won it in a losing Collingwood team, the only player to win an Anzac medal in a losing team? Wasn't Hurd clearly best on the day? I can't remember. I was too young, but I swear that's what I've heard.
Well, I can't remember because I'm too old. After he gets my games just start to muddle in. But I remember Tarrant winning that. I think he kicked 5 for Collingwood that day. And I remember there was conjecture at the time that he shouldn't have won it, but and it wouldn't surprise me that Hurd probably should have won it. But Buckley could have easily won a couple.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to the Anzac medals a little bit later on. We'll continue to go through some of the more memorable wins. So we've just talked about 2009. We'll go a few years after that, 2012. Now, unfortunately, this is one that I didn't get to go to. Watched it on the TV, and it was when Swanee won his first Anzac medal, and he did the little rub at the belly, and Brent Stanton, I think, kicked the goal very late to put Essendon in front, and then with less than a minute left from memory, again, we haven't watched the highlights, a little toe poke from Jarrod Blair on the line, putting us up by a point. They went to the video replay upstairs. I think that might have been the first year of the review system. And it was a goal, and it sort of came off his shin, I think, not so much his toe.
Well, I thought it came off the studs of his, like the underside of his boot almost, like the studs of his boot. But maybe I'm wrong.
No, it was his shin.
Oh, was it? Okay. All right, yeah.
But we got over the line by a point. Swanee had the ball in his hand when the siren went, and that was kind of our revenge for 2009. That was a great game of football. Do you have any memories of that?
Only again. This is a bit of a rush job. We probably should have done. We refreshed. I've been working all day, so I haven't had a chance to kind of refresh my memories of the game. But as I said, a lot of them seem to blur into one. But yeah, I do remember. Yeah, I do remember Blair getting the boot to that, and I went nuts because it looked like could have gone either way the game. But not But other than that, not a lot of strong memories. Have strong memories to last year.
We'll get to last year.
Well, let's get. The only thing I've got to say about last. Oh, okay. Well,
all right. No, we'll skip forward a bit. We'll talk about last year.
Well,
the draw game, obviously.
The drawn game, which a lot of people don't. I've seen the replay of the incident I'm about to talk about, and I reckon so. Moore's taken a mark at centre half back with seconds to go. All right, Langford for Essendon clearly oversteps the mark. And I reckon it would have been 50-metre penalty at any other time of the match. And then they would have had more kicking for any score to win from about 50 out. But I've never heard any other commentary about it. But I think it's clearly he clearly runs over the mark. And I just didn't think the umpire had enough guts to pay it. So,
well, I completely forgot about it until you just mentioned it then.
Yeah. But it'll be interesting. I'll go back and have another look at it. But I kind of had a number of look at it at the time. But there was no other commentary. I'm thinking, am I wrong? Didn't he just clearly step over to Mark Langford in the hope of because he was trying to hold more up? I think.
Well, there were so many big moments in that game for both teams. Like both teams could have easily won. Like you speak of Langford, he missed an absolute sitter from memory about 30 out, almost dead in front. He had a really good game, but that was a bad moment for him. And Elliott, he obviously took that market, what was nearly market a year before Bobby Hill stole it off him, but the greatest ever Anzac Day mark. Took that in the first or second quarter and then had a chance to break the Essendon fans' hearts again. He spilt that chest mark at about 50 out, I would say. And all we had to do was score and we would have won.
But I remember we had this debate at the time last year about the likelihood of him scoring. We were in different camps. I'm thinking heavy legs right at the end of the game. He would have been kicking from the best part of 55 because he took the mark on about the 49-metre mark. He would have been coming back 55 from the boundary. He's kicked goals from the boundary before, but not from that far out. I don't think there's any guarantee he would have even made the distance on that.
I think he would have been kicking from about 50. I think he would have marked it just inside the 50. I could be wrong, but that's just how I remember it. And as we saw, he was able to make the distance easily in the 22 game when you kicked the goal after the siren.
Yeah, well, so you've learned nothing from our debate on this very topic from last year, Dermot. That's what I'm saying. So he's taken the mark at about 49. That's where the man the mark's going to be.
I think he marked it about 45.
Yeah, well, again, we should have done our homework on this and gone back.
But also remember, all he had to do was score. So he just had to basically kick it as long and as hard as he could. It doesn't matter if it was going to be, because there was about 20 seconds left, I think, or 30 seconds left. So they couldn't have won the game, even if he missed. They wouldn't have had enough time to get it from one end to the other. So it's, a lot of the time when they don't make the distance, it's because they need to worry about the accuracy as well. He just needed to bomb it at the goals, and then any score would have won us the game.
Yep.
Anyway, we'll go back a bit now to 2019, another game that I was at, and it was one of the stranger Anzac Day matches. We won that game by less than a kick, and we walked away thinking that we didn't play that well, and we probably didn't deserve to win. That was the famous day where there was about, I reckon, 4 or 5 really questionable decisions that went in our favour, umpiring decisions, that is, that went in our favour. Yeah. One of them, I just remember one of Jack Crisp getting run down and the umpire calling play on. Then when we won, and Pendlebury won the medal that day, the Essendon fans, as they do, they booed, the absolute scum that they are, and then Bucks told them off and whatnot. But in fairness, they are scum, the Essendon fans. But in fairness, I think 6 years on, we can actually admit that they kind of may have actually been robbed that day. There was some awful non-frees that didn't go their way.
Well, it swings and roundabouts. It was like the Footscray game a few weeks ago. Every team's on the receiving end occasionally. But I just I saw a tweet about that very game about a month ago. Essendon fans are still whinging about it. Some guy posted some clip, and 6 years on, whatever it is, they're still whining about it. But yes, I remember they were all class at the end of the game with Pendlebury. Pendlebury just was a bit nonplussed about what was going on. He kind of seemed to be in a bit of shock. Probably trying to work out why they're booing him. But I remember that game.
It was great. I remember, it was obviously pumped. We'd won by less than a kick on Anzac Day. That's great, and celebrated like you would any great win. But then I remember that day I left MCG and jumped straight onto the Sky bus to go to the airport. Like I went straight from MCG to the airport to come home, and I remember just sitting in the Sky bus, just looking out the window, and I just thought, gee, that was a pretty ordinary win. Like we weren't actually that good. You take it though. Absolutely, you take it. But one game that we were good, and this is the last game that we'll look back on, 2023. I think we were close to 5 goals down at 3/4 time. I think 27 or 28 points might have been the margin. And we looked gone. Essendon were all over us. I remember that flog Jake Stringer kicked a goal late in the third quarter and went absolutely off his head. And you're just sitting there and you're like, how have we let this happen? Like at that 23, obviously our premiership year, we were the best team in the comp and they were average as they always are. And we're thinking, how have we let this happen? Enter Nick Dacos in the last quarter of that game. He kicked 2 huge goals, just racked up. It wasn't just Nick, it was a team effort, but we ended up getting over the line and won by about 13 points in the end. It was a massive 3/4 time comeback. And for me, my favourite memory on Anzac Day, I was there. I've never heard a crowd like that outside of finals. It was, the MCG was shaking in that last quarter. Like, it was just an insane game to be at. And of course, Nick Dacos is just, that was, I think we spoke about this game in our last episode. You said that even that Brisbane game was Nick Dacos' best home and away game, and I said that I think this one is, and I stand by that. He was huge in that game.
Well, I kind of reflect just off this and onto Dacos just for the quickest of moments because I am very careful not to make this a Nick Dacos podcast like it was last year. But when you said last week he could be the greatest player ever, he could be. But I think what he will be though is he will be the player by the end of his career. If we have to assume a lot, but let's assume he goes into his mid-30s. He's a bit like Pendlebury. Say he's a bit like Pendlebury, so he plays for another 12, 13, 14 years. I reckon he'll end up being the player who has played the most great games. So
he'll probably be him or Gary Ablett Jr. maybe.
Well, Gary Ablett Jr. took quite a while to get going. His first few years, his teammates had to sit him down and talk to him about smartening up a bit. So at the same age as Nick is now, Nick's miles ahead of what Gary Ablett was doing.
No, that's true. That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So Nick's played about, I think he's played about 70-odd games. You'd have to say of the 70-odd games, 60 conservatively have been what I'd say great games, and that's conservative. So I reckon at the end of, if you're looking ahead 12, 14 years, he could have just hundreds of great games. So while he might not be the greatest player ever, one day he could be, but I think he will certainly have the most great games ever. But there you go. One game I thought you would have brought up was it 2008?
We'll get to that in a second. But
you said the last game we'll reviewing.
So 2023. What do you have any memories from that day?
Just again. Stringer kicking that goal late in the third quarter. Did it put them 28 points up late in the third quarter? Am I right in saying that? We went down 28 points. Yeah. And the other thing I remember is Draper missing that goal. That was very nice.
Yes, of course.
20 metres out, slide angle, would have given them probably it would have kept them ahead. I don't know if it would have drowned us out totally, probably not, but it would have given them breathing space. He misses that, which is very nice, being Sam Draper. Very unpleasant individual. I shouldn't say that. I don't know the guy.
But he's a fuckwit, you're right.
He's across as an unpleasant individual, but I don't know him, so I shouldn't say that. So that's and then of course, who else played well in that last quarter? McCreary played well. and Sidebottom played well. I suppose a lot of players, but there I just remember moments from Sidebottom, McCreary, and
Yeah, well,
Dave.
they kicked the last 2 goals of the game, Sidebottom and Creary.
Yeah. So I remember those. Yeah, but yeah, Nick Dacos certainly had a huge impact. Yeah. So,
All right, so we'll move on to Anzac medal winners. So we'll just talk about the guys that have won multiple medals, and you got and we're just talking Collingwood because Jimmy Hurd won 3, which is great effort, great player, but we won't. This is a Collingwood podcast, so we won't talk about him. Swanee won 2. He won in 2012 and 2014. We spoke about that 2012 game where I think Caro caught him fat or something during the week and he rubbed the belly, and that was great. And I think he had about 42 disposals and kicked a goal or 2, maybe even 2 goals. But that's when that.
Correct you. I always thought it was Caro, but apparently it was Robbo. Mark Robinson called him fat.
Oh, okay.
He did have a back and forth with Caro about something, but I think in this occasion it was Mark Robinson who called him fat.
Oh, fair enough. But 2014, that was, I think, stat wise, I could be wrong again, but stat wise, that game was not even close to his 2012 game. I think he may have only had mid-20 disposals or something, but he kicked 4 goals that game, Swanee, and he was from the midfield, 4 goals from the midfield, and he was, pushing players aside, don't argue, barge him through them. It was like a grown man up against Oz kickers. He was just absolutely just destroying them that day, and from memory, we were down, I think, 40-1 or something like that. We were getting smashed, and Swanee was the one that turned the game, and we ended up winning quite comfortably, maybe like 20 points in the end. But yeah, what are your memories from Dane Swan and his Anzac record?
Well, I particularly remember that goal from the stoppage in the forward pocket and how comical it was, as you described, with seemingly Essendon players like Stanton might have been one. Stanton, he wasn't it, number 5?
Yeah, number 5 was Stanton, yeah.
Number 5 just kind of cartwheeling out of the way after Swanee waxed his hand into his chest. Just seemed to go cartwheeling. And, so it was great. And, of course, it was that the day that he kicked the Buddy-like goal from the running goal.
It was.
Yeah. I think I might have been at that. Was I at that game? Because I remember, I think I was at that game at the opposite end. And I remember when he was, pretty sure I was, when he was running around the boundary, I thought, he's not going to kick, he can't kick this one. Did he kick it on his left foot?
Yeah, it was a floater. I think he did kick it with his left, yeah.
But he was on his right side. Why would he kick on his left? He was kind of on the right. The angle made it worse by kicking. I'm pretty sure he kicked a float on his left foot. Yeah, but I didn't think he was going to kick that because, he wasn't a great kick, Swanee, was he? Like, he was okay, but
he was better than what people give him credit for. People say that he wasn't damaging. I don't think he was that bad.
He was damaging because he run and carry and he wasn't a poor kick. He just wasn't a great kick. But no, he was definitely damaging.
He's right. Like, he's in a way, Swanee. He's underrated. Like, we talk about Bucks and we talk about Pendles, and these days we talk about Nick Dacos as being, the great Collingwood midfielder. Swanee's comfortably in that group as well. He was a gun, and what he had that I guess Bucks had this, but what he had that Pendles and Nick don't have is he was able to push forward and be like another target up there, essentially a medium-sized target. He was great overhead and very dangerous around goals. Love Swanee, love him.
Well, that was part of. Well, of course, that was the plan to have him playing as a permanent forward or near permanent forward, and unfortunately, it didn't because of the injury. We didn't get to see it. I think he would have been great in that position.
Yeah, I remember his last year. He obviously got injured within the first 30 seconds of round 1, but he played the whole order pre-season games, and there was a game that we played down in Geelong, and he kicked 4 or 5 or something from memory as a forward. That was, like you said, that was going to be his role in 2016 or 2017, whenever his last year was. I think it was 2016.
2016. Yep. Well, of course, he played. We're getting off topic a little bit, but that 2012 final against Port Adelaide that they won, but we almost snatched.
2013, that was.
2013, sorry. We almost snatched that. on the back of Swanee going forward and kicking about 3 goals.
No. We got smashed by Port Adelaide in 2013 final. You're thinking of the 2012 semi-final against West Coast. It was the week where John McCarthy died.
Was it? It was against West Coast, wasn't it? I thought it was 2012. It was against West Coast. Is that at the MCG?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the following year, we played elimination final against Port Adelaide and got absolutely smashed at the MCG again.
That was the game where Hinkley came out and said, "You're playing 2 sides tonight."
Possibly, I don't remember that.
Yeah, in reference to there being a split in the playing ranks. A bit of discontent, but anyway.
All right. So we'll move on to the other 2-time Anzac winner, and you're going to have to talk about this guy because I didn't see him as a Collingwood player. I saw him as a North Melbourne player, but that is Big Severio Rocker. Won it in 1995 and 1998. You kind of touched on him before. What are your memories of Sav on Anzac Day? And you said he had a great record against Fletcher.
Yeah, he loved playing. Oh, look, I think when we did our mock Collingwood draft a couple of months ago, I spoke on Sav there. His best and worst are as far apart as probably of any player I've ever seen, maybe Mason Cox. He could be just devastating on his day. Like he was like Tony Lockett, unstoppable when he got his tail up and was in good form. Beautiful mark, beautiful kick. Like as we know, he could kick them with ease from inside 60 and even a bit further out if he was really going. And he was often really going against Fletcher. He obviously just fancied himself against Fletcher, probably because of weight difference. I remember when he first started out, he had Brereton down there. Brereton played 15 games in 95 for Pies. He kicked 30 goals. He was a really underestimated recruit for Collingwood. People don't talk about. He was only there for the 1 year, but he really helped Rocker along. I think that was Rocker's. I think Rocker started in 93, 94. And
I think 92.
92, that early, was he? And he was he had to learn a lot about the game. And I think Brereton really helped him in that respect, like sitting next to him in the forward pocket. But just absolutely devastating on his day and fantastic to watch. You know, the high marking, the huge kicking. He was a bigger, and I've heard Anthony Rocker say this too. Anthony and Sav were interviewed by Mike Sheehan on Open Mic, and they said exactly the same thing as I've always thought. Sav was a bigger drop punt than Anthony, but Anthony was a bigger torpedo. He could kick the torpedo further. So, there you go.
Right, and then we'll move on to the one Collingwood player that has won 3 Anzac medals, obviously sharing the record with James Hird, and that is the great Scott Pendlebury, who won back-to-back in 2010, 2011, and again in 2019. Now, I should have checked this, but I'm going to go with it anyway. When he won the medal in 2019, I'm pretty sure that I read somewhere that he was the oldest player to win the Anzac medal. And that was 6 years ago, and he's still going now.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. So what is he now? He's 37, is he? Yeah, probably. He probably would have been because, of course, the Anzac medal hasn't been around for a long, long time. Like, it's a 30-year history, I know. But, yeah, he probably would have been. I seem to remember he probably should have won another too. Do you recall? I remember one particular game where it was thought that he probably should have won.
Possibly. He's especially when he was in his prime. He was always a top 3 player in the ground.
Yeah.
My main memory from Pendles and these 3 Anzac medals, other than when he got booed by the Essendon fans that we just talked about, was 2011. I went to that game. I went with my friend Tom. You remember Tom?
Yeah, I remember Tom.
Yep. And yeah, it was a hot day. It was stinking hot. I'm pretty sure I got the year right. I'm pretty sure this was 2011. It might have been 2010, but I think it was 2011 because I remember the dreadlocks, and then 2011 was the dreadlock year.
Oh yeah.
And he just kicked a freak goal from the boundary line, Pendlebury. And it was just That was 2011. Can you believe that? We're in 2025, and who's to say that he won't win a fourth one on Friday? Like he's just unreal. He's just how is he still going?
But for a guy who never does anything wrong, the dreadlocks, that was yeah. How long did he have that for? A good year or two, the dreadlocks?
No, he only had it, I think, for half of 2011.
Yeah. But it's always I suppose it's like any game, but the obscure players often stand up.
Well,
Like,
hold on. Stop for a second. Stop. This is a good segue because the very next segment right here is obscure Anzac Day medal winners.
right.
So good timing, Michael. Michael doesn't know any of the rundown here, so he timed that perfectly. So we'll go through them. So 2002, this is the most obscure Anzac medalist ever. It's the most famous one. And that is Mark McGough, who was 17 years of age. He'd only played, I think, this was his second game of football. He came out on that really wet, awful day. And it was a low scoring game. I think we won about 60-30 or something like that. And this was the only win so when I said before that Essendon had won, I think 7 out of 8 Anzac matches in a row, this was the one that they didn't win. And it was Mark McGough that led the way. We were there that day. I was obviously probably a bit too young to take in what an amazing effort that was. But what are your memories of Mark McGough and that 2002 game?
Yeah, like you said, it was a very, very heavy underfoot. He was kind of, I suppose, a modern day equivalent, similar play would be, he was a slightly smaller version of a Ned Long.
Yeah.
He played a bit like Ned Long. And the thing I remember most about Mark McGough is what he didn't do. And it's through no fault of his own. But we spoke about this last year in the pod, the 2002 grand final. I think he should have played that day, and because those conditions were very similar to the Anzac Day conditions of that year. Not pelting rain the whole day or anything like that, but it was very heavy underfoot and so forth in climate conditions. And yeah, I just remember, I can't remember the circumstances around his non-selection, or even if there was a lot of speculation whether he was going to play. But I remember looking back and thinking, why did McGough play? Like they brought in, what's his name from Brisbane, the former Brisbane.
Jared Molloy.
Yeah, Malloy. They brought him and he didn't impact at all. And I'm thinking, gee, they missed the trick not bringing McGough in. And didn't have a long career, of course. At one stage, and I think he talked about this on the front bar last year, they thought he'd broken his leg or something one game, and it was very forlorn at the end of the game that players are getting him around him and trying to offer sympathy, and he ends up playing the next week. So I'm not sure what happened there.
It's an unreal story though. Like he was literally a high school kid. Like we played that game on the weekend, and he ends up rocking up to school on the Monday with the Anzac medal around his neck. He's 17 years of age. Like what,
Yeah.
It just doesn't. You won't ever see that again because they don't play as 17-year-olds anymore.
No, well, I saw Heard on Channel 9 last night, and he was reminiscing. They had Malthouse and Sheedy, I know, reminiscing about some of the games. And Heard said, oh, yeah, before the 2002 game, they had the one of the assistant coaches who had to give a brief rundown of some of the opposition and just reinforce some of their plans before the game. And he's looking through the list. He said, oh, yeah, and they're bringing in this guy, never heard of him, McGough. And then he kept on going. Didn't even speak about him, and he's ended up getting best on ground.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, another obscure player you briefly mentioned before, 2008. Paul Medhurst kicked the bag. I think 6 goals from memory, 5 or 6 goals.
Yeah. I wanted to say 8.
Oh,
Maybe-
no.
Maybe exaggerating. Maybe I was exaggerating.
No, it was 5 or 6.
Was it? It was only that much?
I think it might have been 6.
Right. I think you might probably be right, yeah.
He won All Australian that year, Medhurst. He only played about 60, 70 games for us, but they were a bloody good 50 to 50 to 60 of those games are good because his last year with us was a little bit off. Let's just put it that way. Our premiership year, 2010 was his last year.
He was just hugely talented, and great to watch. He was, I don't know, would you describe him as a little bit like an Elliot without the speckies?
Yeah, that's fair. He was sort of that medium. Oh, I guess Elliott's a small, but he plays like a medium, doesn't he?
He plays like the medium forward, even going right back. You know who he actually does remind me a lot of, and you'd have to be old, Craig Davis, Nick Davis's father. He was very Craig Davis-like, and Craig Davis is a very, very clever player, very underrated player. Yeah, he reminds me a bit of him. Yeah.
I think there's a famous story, and I think Andres might have brought it up last night on his live stream that Medhurst was basically going around saying before this game that he's going to kick 5 and win the medal or something like that.
Yeah, I was listening to the Andreas' show this morning on the way to work, and yeah, he did mention. He said he manifested in the week leading up. He manifested that he was going to do this, and it came true, of course. So. Yeah, there you go.
We won that game by about 70 points. We absolutely smashed them in the end. So, yeah, but Medhurst, one of my, honestly, even to this day, one of my all-time favourite players that have played for Collingwood. I remember when he was at Freo, I hated him. I just despised him. And then he came to Collingwood and ended up loving him. So it's funny how that kind of works.
Well, we've done quite well out of Freo, considering they've only been around for about 30 years. You know, Clement and Holland and yeah.
Chris Mayne.
Chris Mayne, what a good player Chris Mayne was. Really, off topic anyway, so we won't talk about Chris Mayne.
Lockie Schultz.
Played some Anzac days. What's that? Lockie Schultz, of course. Yeah, we've done really well out of them, haven't we? Jeez.
Chris Tarrant 2.0, the defender version of Chris Tarrant.
Right. More, yeah, exactly. Mark Harvey made the decision to throw him back, and I think it was a good decision. And we kind of, capitalised on that. Yeah.
One player that gets sort of forgotten about when you talk about these obscure Anzac winners, we talk about McGough, we talk about Medhurst. There's another player coming up soon, which, is well remembered. But this one, 2015, Paul Seedsman, doesn't get talked about anymore, but that was his greatest ever game. I know he had a really good year for Adelaide after he left us. I think he may have made the All-Australian squad that year, but I think this was his best ever game, especially for Collingwood. And I think meters gained, from memory, it was a fairly new stat at the time, I will add, but I think at that time he smashed a record. It's probably been broken since, but he smashed a record. Yeah,
you took the words out of my mouth. That was the big highlight of his game. The meters gained was off the Richter. Like, I should have looked it up. Like, was it like 800 or something ridiculous?
No, I think he got the 1,000. I think he did. Did he?
Yeah. Not sure about that. Might be a bit like the Medhurst 6 goals as opposed to 8. Things kind of, kind of exaggerate in your mind. But I think it was a good 800 metres. Yeah, he played it. And it was a pity because, Buckley loved those kind of run and carry guys, didn't he? So like Sinclair was another one.
Oh, Benny Sinclair.
Yeah, Buckley had a lot of time for Sinclair. I think he saw a bit of himself in these type of players, the run and carry, but it never quite worked for Seedsman. He just kept on getting injured, and then, as we know, got concussion in the end at Adelaide. But he could have been a very good player had he had a decent run with it. Yeah.
All right, and the last obscure Anzac winner, I guess he's not so much of an obscure player now, but at the time he was. In 2022, a young man with bleached blonde hair came out and he kicked the bag, and he was shushing the crowd. And I speak of Jack Ginnivan.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Well, what can you say? I don't think it was it was a good game. Wasn't one of the great Anzac Day medalist performances. But you said he kicked 5, didn't he?
Kicked 4 or 5, yeah.
And he played a fair bit on Heppel.
I can't remember that, but what I do remember was, this was 22. This is Fly's first year. And I remember that round 1 game against St Kilda, Fly's first game, and Nick Dacos's debut. And we won that game. I was there at Marvel Stadium, and afterwards they went and down to the ground, and he had that iPhone out or whatever, and this is Jack Ginnivan, he was recording, he's saying, light work, all this, one of many. And Kane Corns comes out on the Sunday Footy Show, absolutely slams him. and says, "Who are you? Who's Collingwood? You've achieved nothing. You finished 17th last year. This guy's played 5 games, good win, but just settle down and actually earn your respect." Blah blah blah. And then anyway, coming into Anzac Day, Jack Ginnivan, biggest game of all. You know what he says to Kane Corns? He says, "Fuck you," and he bleaches his hair blonde, and he comes out, he kicks a bag, wins the medal, and then Kane Corns ended up coming out and just taking a piss out. This is everyone hates Kane, but I quite like him. He then comes out and he bleaches his hair as well. Like he knew he was wrong, and he was just taking a piss out of himself. It was quite funny, but yeah, no, that was a good game from Guinea, and the Essendon fans, they never forget. I was at a Hawthorn Essendon game. It was Guinea's first game for the Hawks, so it would have been last year because I must have been over for the Collingwood game in round 1, and I must have just gone across to this one. Guinea's first game for the Hawks, and it was against the Bombers, and every time he got it, they just booed him. They don't forget. They don't forget the Essendon fans.
Yeah, I got long memories. But yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Yeah,
That is our.
So I was going to say, like some of the obscure players, like guys like Cockatoo Collins. I don't know if I'm exaggerating in my mind. Do you know who Shea Cockatoo?
Yeah, he played for Port Adelaide as well.
Yeah, played for little kind of goal sneak. He always used to bob up. He seemed to always bob up on those days and kick a couple and. Of course, like Zaha Harak is just bobbing up at that moment. It seemed to be.
Can I throw a player out there? For some reason, I just remember Ricky Dyson always going all right against us on Anzac Day.
I don't remember that. I remember Ricky Dyson. I don't remember how he performed against us. But and it's probably no more than any other game of league footy. But everything's heightened in these games, and the obscure plays, those obscure moments, they tend to live with you for a bit longer. There you go. But yeah, missing that will always be. It's my eternal regret missing that first game. And then, as we spoke about last year, it ended up taking my real estate license off me anyway. So
do you want to explain why?
No, I won't go into it. They were trumped up charges, but do you know how bad you have to be, how dodgy you have to be to lose your real estate license? They normally celebrate things like that in the ad industry. But
how does it not surprise me that you're the world's most dodgy real estate agent?
But they suspended it. They didn't quite take it. They said you could either surrender it or we'll take it off you. And I surrendered it and never went back.
See, what I always heard, because I think you're a real estate agent when I was basically like, what, 1 or 2, so I don't remember. What I always heard from Mum, I'm pretty sure, was that you lost your license for gossiping. She obviously didn't want to tell me the truth, whatever that was.
No, she's getting 2 stories mixed up. There was one where I lost my job, and there was another one where I lost my license. But, so she's getting the 2 stories confused. The reasons as to it. It wasn't really gossiping. It was just, a long time ago now. I can't quite remember. But as I said, trumped up charges. Never found guilty in a tribunal. May I just add that?
Right, yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the 2025 Anzac game. Let's just do a bit of a mini preview. So the Bombers, they're off 3 wins in a row, but they're still crap. Let's face it, they nearly lost to West Coast last week. They beat Melbourne a couple of weeks before that in Gabba round. Nothing to really ride home. I can't remember who the other win was against. But the one thing about Essendon is, despite the record that we just spoke about and how we've dominated in recent years, they always seem to show up on Anzac Day. I was looking through the results, and there was quite a few close ones. They didn't win them, but there's quite a few close ones. So it doesn't really matter where they are on the ladder. But this is their grand final. So, yeah, they're crap and we're good. We're top of the ladder. We're 5-1. We've won 5 in a row. But we've got to bring our A game because they're not gonna play finals. So this is their grand final. It doesn't get any easier. Today it was confirmed that Darcy Moore is out. He'll miss this week. So I would like to talk a little bit about maybe how we could structure up. Dan Houston obviously comes back from suspension. So basically the options I'm going to give you here. So with Dan Houston coming in and Darcy Moore going out, Um, I think the options are Harry Perryman stays in defence and Billy Frampton plays on 2 metre Peter and Jeremy Howe and Braden Maynard can play a little bit taller on Caddy and Jones. So that's option one. Option two is Charlie Dean comes in for one of Hoskin Elliott or Ed Allen, and Perryman heads back into the midfield. Now, I was at Collingwood training today, and Perryman was training with the midfield group. So for me, I have a feeling that Charlie Dean might play, but they haven't had their selection meeting yet. So would you go in a little bit smaller and say to Jeremy Howe and Braden Maynard, you man up on Caddy and Jones, who aren't the most dominant forwards of all time, and leave Perryman back? Or would you bring in Charlie Dean to take one of those tours and unfortunately drop one of Hoskin Elliott or Ed Allen out of the side altogether?
I would, like, Langford's back, isn't he?
That's a very, very good question. I have no idea. I didn't even take Langford into consideration. I just looked at their team sheet against West Coast and sort of looked at their forwards. Yeah.
No, I heard Brad Scott say a couple of days ago that he'd expect him to be playing. He did his hamstring in round one, but it was expecting him back. So if he comes in, I would keep the same structure as we've had. So do a like for like with Moore. So put a Billy Frampton on Peter Wright, as I think they would have done, and maybe put a Howe on Langford. But then again, you got that Caddy as well. So yeah, I'd keep the same structure and bring Charlie Dean in. Peter Wright, I've always been a huge fan of Peter Wright. And I'm spewing he's back just in time, or a week before Anzac Day. And I had a look at some of his highlights from last week, and they weren't really tall man's goals. Like he got a couple. He kicked 6, I think. 2 or 3 were from lead ups. So just took it on the chest. He had a couple over the top. He had a crumbing goal. So he wasn't kicking them through his height last week. So yeah, because his ability overhead's always worried me. Langford, I rate. He's a good lead-up forward. So, yeah, I'd keep the same structure. As far as the midfield, I remember thinking last year after they beat us in the second game, I'm thinking we've lost. Well, we've failed to beat Essendon twice this year. Essendon, who, they obviously drew with us in the first game. They beat us in the second game. And the common denominator was Zach Merritt just being able to run around, do whatever he likes. So since then, I've been thinking next time we play them, we just have to tag him and we'll win. If we take him from mid-30s to low 20s, I'm not saying you have to keep him to 12, 13 possessions. He can still have an impact, but just don't let him get off the chain and get his 35, 37. But then, having thought about just in the last week or so, do we want to muck around with our midfield? It's kind of humming along at the moment, and there's a lot of conjecture these days about whether it's a wise thing to tag. Yes, you might have an impact on that individual player, but then other players get off the lead, as Nick Dacos has spoken about just recently. Like, it actually helps the structure. So I'm in two minds now whether they should have a side bottom go to Merritt or just back ourselves in.
Well, I had this in my notes as well, what to do with Merritt, and I kind of had the defensive structure and what we do in the midfield sort of connected in the way that if we decide to go in smaller and Perryman stays in defence, then I don't think we will tag. If we bring in a Charlie Dean to replace Moore, with Houston also coming in, that means there's a spot. That means Perryman will be pushed out of that defence, and he'll be back in the midfield. Now, we saw Perryman tag Horn Francis in round 1, and that's a game that we won by near on 90 points. So it didn't affect us that game. I normally would agree with you. I'm not huge when it comes to tagging, But this guy has just killed us one too many times. Zach Mirror, you talk about how he did it twice last year. It goes way back. It goes back years. He's always played well against Collingwood. And for me, I'm happy for Perryman to play maybe not a hard tag, but sort of just like a cooler. Just stay with him, and we'll reassess as the game goes on if we need to drop the tag or. But for me, Perryman is just so bloody flexible. He's so flexible that if he's out of that back six, I want him tag in merit in the midfield. I still haven't personally made up my mind how I want Collingwood to structure up. If I want a Charlie Dean to come in. Originally, I was thinking, let's go smaller and keep Perryman down there, but then I didn't ever take into consideration the fact that Langford would be back. I wonder if Langford would just replace someone like a Harry Jones. He's not a very good player. Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, that's sort of what I think. I think, yeah, if we are going to tag Merritt, Perryman's the man, not Sidebottom. Sidebottom's our second best midfielder this year after Nick Dacos. Now, the question's going to be, what are they going to do with Nick Dacos? And the next question is, does it really matter? Because we saw him destroy James Jordan a couple of weeks ago. He ripped Brisbane apart, and they tried to put Berry on him in the third quarter, and that didn't work. So, but they're still going to put some time into him. Setterfield's been doing a little bit of tagging this year. Durham always, does a little bit of tagging here and there. He would just run them off their feet, won't he? Those two,
Yeah, look, I think they'll go with Durham. He's a good tough player, and he plays that role a lot. So it's not as if they're going away from what they do quite often anyway. So I reckon they'll go for a hard tag on him, and I think it will be Durham.
You reckon it'll be a hard tag there?
I think so. Yeah,
they're not known for doing their hard tags. Like they do have these guys occasionally run with them, but then there's never really a hard tag coming from Essendon.
I remember Durham did it on. Didn't he do a hard tag on Bontempelli last year?
He did. That was a hard tag. I reckon that's the only time they've gone with the hard tag since Scott's been in charge of Essendon.
Yeah, and it was pretty successful from memory, wasn't it? As far as
Yes, but I think from memory, and I could be wrong, they actually played us the very next week, or it might have been 2 weeks after, and everyone said, well, Durham did the job on Bontempelli. It's going to happen to Dacos, and it didn't. I think he may have gone with him at stoppages, but it was not a hard tag, and this was only like 1 or 2 weeks after that success he had on Bontempelli.
Yeah.
Speaking of midfield, as I just said, I was on training before, and one thing that stuck out to me was Ned Long. Like, Dacos was best on ground at training today, Nick, that is, as he always is. But Ned Long was a close second. He is just an absolute animal. He's a beast. He's just full of confidence at the moment, like standing up in tackles, breaking. He was getting involved in the chains as well. And he's not the neatest kick, but you know what he is? He's a long kick. He's actually a really long kick, and no pun intended. And
sorry to interrupt, just quickly. Just with his kicking, what else he is? He's a really penetrative, fast kick. Like it's like a tracer bullet. Like like you said, he doesn't pinpoint it, but it travels through the air quickly, which is important. You don't want kicks looping up, giving defenders time to get back and whatnot. So he just strikes me as a really fast kick.
But yeah, he just impressed me, and it might have a little bit to do with the fact that I'm now looking for him because I've got a huge man crush on the guy. But yeah, he was unbelievable, and I'm not a betting man. I reckon I bet 3 times a year. I place a bet 3 times a year. I normally place a bet at the start of the year. I normally go Collingwood for the flag and Nick Dacos for the Brownlow as a multi every year. I start off doing that. And then I bet twice late in the year in the same week, Brownlow medal and grand final. They're normally the only times I ever place a bet. Today I looked and I saw Ned Long is paying $34 to win the Anzac medal. And I couldn't help it. I got on, I chucked 20 on, win me back 680. So I highly recommend anyone that's looking for a bit of value, gamble responsibly, of course. Don't put too much on, but maybe a sneaky 20, win you back close to 700. I do recommend. And Nick Dacos is paying like $3.50 or something like that. And look, he probably will win it. If we get up and win, he probably will win it. But if they put attention into him, who are the other two Collingwood players that have really stood out in recent weeks? And it's Ned Long and Steele Sidebottom. And like Sidey's about $12 to win it. I think if you're really looking for the value, and it's meant to be a wet game, which will probably suit Ned Long, chuck a little bit on him. It's speaking of the odds, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think Collingwood have like 12 of the top 15 players in the market for Anzac medal. Like I think the only Essendon players in there are Merritt and two others, I think, in the top 15. So that's quite funny. But we'll move on. So the ruck department, this would be interesting. So I think everybody's assuming that Membry will come in for Cox. I know that you're a big Cox fan. Andreas is a big Cox fan, but I think other than you two, I think everyone.
Well, I heard Andreas talking about it this morning. I'm not as because he talked about his podcast last week and he touched on it again of his latest one. I'm not as sold on it as he is. I'm not sure really, because he makes a good point. I make a good point in that when he goes into the ruck, you lose nothing at all, and he can be dangerous up forward on his day. And it'd be nice just to keep McStay in the forward line and not have to throw him in there. I'm not sure what structure they should go with. So yeah.
Well, it's going to, like I said before, it's going to be a wet day, which doesn't help Cox. But also they've lost. So they had Draper and Nick Bryan in their team all year, and they were actually working quite well together. For the first time in Draper's career, he was actually doing something. They've both gone down with season-ending injuries, and now you've got a 55-year-old Todd Goldstein that's going to be a sole ruck. I think Darcy Cameron will be able to handle that on his own. So I don't think that really helps Cox, who are coming up against this week.
Well, they could get Wright could give him a chop out in the ruck occasionally.
He'll give him a chop out, but they're going to want Wright forward after he kicks 6 goals, especially because we don't have Darcy Moore. They're going to want to make the most of that. So I reckon it's almost a certainty that Cox is dropped. I think it will most likely be for Membry. But if it was a dry day, I would 100% say Membry. There's a part of me that's thinking maybe just maybe they might go in a little bit smaller and not play Membry this week, because it is meant to be pissing down. And a little smoky is if we don't go with Tim Membry, maybe a debut for Will Hayes could be on the cards. Apparently he was best on ground in the VFL. I think kicked 3 goals last week. He's a small forward, likened to Bobby Hill in the way that he plays. I sent you that clip of him in the preseason running down the wing. So just look out for that. I don't know. Do you reckon there's any chance that we will go in a bit smaller and drop Cox for a small more so than Membry?
Look, common sense says, given the conditions, we would go in smaller. But I've seen them select the 2 rucks, Cox and Cameron, over the years in torrential weather. And I don't know if there was one particular game where I reckon Cox had the greatest 5-possession game I've ever seen in my life in the pouring rain. He was just tapping the ball down. The ball was coming to the forward line. He was just tapping it down to the likes of DeGoey and so forth. Forget who it was. It might have been against Essendon. So they have played him in inclement weather in the past. So I'm not sure that was going to stop them. I did have something else to say, but I've momentarily forgot. But you keep on going.
That's right.
Sorry to interrupt. Goldstein. There was a suggestion I heard the other day that Goldstein hasn't been playing a lot of footy recently in the twos.
He's played 1 game for the year.
He has only played 1 game. Well, he's gonna need a fair bit of help in the ruck if that's the case. So Peter Wright's not going to be able to play a lot, and he's going to have to play significant minutes in the ruck. Peter Wright.
More of a reason not to play Cox then.
Yeah, maybe.
We just don't need him. We just don't need him this week.
Yeah, 37-year-old who's played 1 reserves game for the year. He's not going to. He's not playing.
That's not even his fault or Essendon's fault. It's because of this awful fixture in the VFL where it feels like every couple of weeks a team has a bye. I think they've already had like two byes or something this year, Essendon. They had one that was sort of a bye that was they were fixtured for, and then they had a whole week off for Gather Round when they did the VFL v to SA NFL game. So he just hasn't had a chance. And it's funny because it's Essendon, but like this has happened to us a few times where the fixture in the VFL, our players have only played like one or two games in a month. It's ridiculous. But we'll move on. So I listened to Fly's press conference today that was straight after training, and he mentioned that the journo asked him about the goalie, talking about, the goalie hasn't looked himself yet. He's still been kicking a couple of goals a game, but it's nowhere near his explosive best. And Fly agreed, and he said, yeah, we've been sort of managing him through, which, there's no secret. But he said something that sort of like was quite interesting, that this is the first week this year that the goalie has trained during the week and will play a game. So he hasn't trained and played a game in the same week at all this year. So be interesting to see how he goes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a type of game he could being a big game. You could easily see him having an impact. Maybe not over the four quarters, but you could see some of what Jerry Waitley calls the goey moments. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he kicked 3 or 4.
He could.
From limited chances. So yeah,
because especially if Perryman's going back in midfield, we're definitely not going to need him in there with Pendles and Sidebottom and Nick and Ned Long and all those guys.
And isn't it nice that Stringer's not playing? Now you forget about what you think of him as a person. Over the last few years, going into Essendon fixtures, he was the guy I feared the most. Yeah, he's not.
He was inconsistent, but he had huge moments still.
Yeah. He could go into the midfield and make an impact there. Not unlike the Goey in a lot of ways.
The Goey's far better player.
No, the Goey's a far better player, but in terms of their style, in terms of being impact players, in terms of being impact players both on ball and in the forward line. Again, I likened the Goey to Kink last week. For similar reasons. They were impact players. Yeah, it's good just not to have to worry about him tomorrow. Friday.
Right. And as I've mentioned multiple times, I was at training today and I was texting you at the time, and this has nothing to do with this upcoming week, but I just wanted to mention it. To my surprise, I got there about 10 minutes late, and I stayed for about an hour and 20. God, they were out there a long time. And the first thing I noticed was Tom Mitchell in full training, because the injury list came out, I think, yesterday, and it said TBC on there. And I'm just thinking, geez, is he ever going to be back? And then, so I wasn't expecting anything from Tom Mitchell today. I wasn't even expecting to see him. Rock up, and there he is in full training. He started off in drills. He was in the same group it was right in front of me, the same group as Pendlebury, Perryman, Long, and Lipinski. And they're practicing their inside mid craft, and he was coming up against all these guys and holding his own. It was his first session back into full training, and there was one moment right at the end where they blew the whistles to say come back in, and the ball was sort of there, and him and Ned Long were fighting for it. They were fighting for it, and I was thinking this would be interesting, just 1-on-1, and they weren't giving up, and all the boys were cheering them on, and everyone was watching them, and Mitchell ended up winning. He ended up getting the ball. Long ended up tackling him. So it was almost a nil or draw. But it was funny because, I mean, in the back of their mind, they're thinking, as the season goes on, we're going to be going for the same spot. And I did a little bit of research after, because I noticed they were actually sort of standing together a lot, Long and Mitchell. And I saw them talking a fair bit. Not sure if they're mates or whatnot, but they did spend a year together at Hawthorn. So Ned Long's first year, 22 at the Hawks, was Tom Mitchell's last year at the Hawks. So I'm wondering whether, similar position, spent that year at the Hawks together. I wonder if he was a mentor to him maybe in his first year. Who knows? And now they're fighting for that same spot. And maybe they're not fighting for that same spot. Maybe there's a world where shuffle the magnets and they can both fit in, which would be nice. But watching Mitchell today, it kind of just reminded me that this guy is a quality player, and he's a solid little unit as well. He's like a little ball of muscle. I think I heard someone describe him at the training as a bulldog. He Yeah, I don't know, but do you see a world where he can slot back in?
I don't see a world where they can both be in the same side, but what great depth it would be for the person who misses out. We're starting to stack up a bit of depth now. Just like, even a guy like Jacob Ryan, he seems to be the forgotten man of the club. Yet he was highly touted. He came in for one game, unfortunately, got concussed, and I think he's just waiting for Howe to retire. I don't know. I can't see him getting the game either. But we seem to be getting really good depth, which is great, which is what you're going to need if you want to win the flag. So yeah, in answer to your question, no, I can't see them both being in the side. I don't think it would be wise.
And after training, we brought out a thing and it said Tom Mitchell back in full training, blah blah blah. Will be nursed through for the next fortnight though, so he's not going to be available for VFL selection for another couple of weeks, which surprised me because looking at him, I thought you're ready right now. But then again, they're probably doing what they've done with the Goey and just trying to sort of manage him through. You know, you don't want another flare up of that foot injury.
No, so you'd think based on that they wouldn't be considering him for senior selection for another 6 weeks. You'd want 4 games, depending on how injuries go. But ideally, you'd want him playing about 3 to 4 reserves games to really get him back up and going before you consider him for seniors. I would have thought.
Yeah, you're probably right.
He's still best part of 6 weeks away at the earliest, I reckon. Which isn't a thing.
The last thing I just wanted to quickly touch on before we get to our tips and see if you have any final words is Jack Crisp. He's going to equal Jimmy Stein's record, 243 games in a row, I think, is it?
Yeah. So he's currently got 243. I think it's 244 equal it this week.
He's equaling it this week.
Oh, yeah, he's equaling it this week. And then against Geelong, it'll be 245, I'm pretty sure. It'd be nice if he went on long enough that he was ahead of Steins based purely just on Collingwood games.
Well, how many of those games came as a Brisbane player?
I think about 7.
Okay. He should be able to get there.
Yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was about 7. So you'd hope just to have a nice and neat that all Collingwood games in excess. But what a fantastic effort! For a physical contact sport as it is, to not miss a game for 11 years is just insane. And already you've got the negative people. They're just so negative on Twitter, aren't they? Instead of just, I don't like the term celebrating achievement, but you'd have to celebrate this achievement. It's a great achievement. And these petty people coming out, and the first one I heard, and I was expecting this, was, remember he started as a sub 1 game last year, as if to say Steins never sat on the bench.
Yeah, especially back then, you could spend a whole game on the bench without playing any minutes.
He would have been on the bench enough time. So already trying to pick holes in his record.
Well, did you see that was a Carlton supporter, and I commented, and I got a screenshot of that game where he started as sub, and Crisp in that game was against Brisbane at the Gabba last year. He still had 13 disposals, 5 tackles, kicked a goal. From memory, you gave him a vote in the Julian Rowe medal. And I compared that next to a picture of Patrick Cripps and what Patrick Cripps did against Collingwood only a few weeks ago, where he had the same amount of disposals, less tackles, kicked the goal. And I said, well, Chris from 39% game time was able to do pretty much the exact same as what Patrick Cripps was able to do from 80% game time against us a couple of weeks ago. Never got a reply.
Yeah. So you just get these miserable people who just can't, they can't give anybody any credit at all.
He's been an amazing player. So we talk about guys that can play inside mid, and we've just, in the last few weeks we've talked about that. We don't even mention him anymore because he's been playing basically full-time wing this year. There's just no room for him in the midfield. Not to say that, he's still probably one of our better inside mids, but as in he's the most flexible. So it's easy to push him to a wing or a half-back flank or even a half-forward flank. Like, he's just that bloody flexible. But I don't have the numbers on me, but I'm pretty sure Champion Data rate him as the 3rd best finals player since 2010 or something. I think he's only behind Dusty and Swanee. Am I right in saying that?
That's what I understand. And how he didn't win the Gary Ayres medal in 23 is beyond me. He had a great.
Sam Walsh won it.
Yeah, Sam Walsh won it. Yeah. Anyway. No, he's been. Has he been the best value for money recruit almost in the history of the game without having thought too much about it? Like he's famous for being called the steak knives. And he just, we get a lazy 243 games out of him straight. One of our best finals players, if not the best finals player of his generation, or close to it, for Collingwood, that is, and not far off the league. What a fantastic pickup he's been.
Unbelievable.
And he kicked 2 goals in that grand final, didn't he? 2 long-range goals.
Yeah.
And ironically, it was against a club who got rid of him because they didn't think he could kick.
It's funny. And I'm sure we'll talk more about him and his career next week when he breaks the record. So we'll move on. Before we get to the tips and the Anzac medal predictions, is there anything else you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
All right, so we'll get into it. So I'll start off. I'm tipping us to win. I'm only tipping us to win by 15. I just think, we're a far better team than them, but I'm thinking maybe the rain will bring us back to the level a little bit, but it's also their grand final. They're going to be desperate to win, and they're going to put in a good effort, I think, Essendon, but we'll still get over the line by 15 points. And look, Anzac medal, my gut's telling me Nick Dacos, but I'm going to go Ned Long. I'm going to back him what I've put my $20 on, and he could go down as one of those obscure Anzac medal winners. I reckon alongside your Mark McGoffs, Medhurst, Seedsmans, Ginnivans of the world, that could be Ned Long next in line. What do you reckon?
Well, as far as the margin, I think if it was going to be a dry day, we would absolutely belt them. Like, 50 points, whatever you like. But that would, of course, if there's a bit of rain around, it might bring that back. So I'm saying 22 points is in the back of my head. As far as best on ground, Long is a good tip. And Nick Dacos is the obvious. But again, something in my back of my head saying Dan Houston.
I really like that because he was $15 on Sportsbet, and I actually considered chucking a couple of dollars on him as well. And I thought, no, I can't spend all my money on bloody Sportsbet today, so I didn't. But yeah, I think that's a good shout.
Yeah, I think he'll be champion at the bit. And I think part of the attraction for coming to Collingwood was playing these games. So I think he would want to repay the club for having missed the last 2, and also perform in front of a huge crowd. I'm going to go Dan Houston.
Well, that's a good tip. All right, so moving on to our next podcast. I don't know when it's going to be, Michael. So Michael's always on my back, but let's bring it out as soon as we can, and that's fair enough. Like we like to bring it out 24 to 48 hours after. I'm actually flying out to New Zealand a day after Anzac Day, so the 26th, and I come back to Melbourne a day before our Geelong match. So I'll be there close to a week. So it might be a few days after the game. Is what I'm saying.
Why don't we do it on Friday night?
No, I'm not coming back. I'm not coming back straight from the game to here, recording a podcast, editing the podcast, then having to stay up late doing that, and then wake up early the next day to go to New Zealand. Not happening, Michael.
Edit this out. They don't want to hear this. This is housekeeping.
No, but that's what I'm saying. I'm trying to say, stay patient to the Into the Woods community. It might be a little bit later in the week that we bring out a podcast next week. But hopefully now you've had this bonus episode. You might need a bit of a break from us and our annoying voices.
Yeah, I think they're going to cope quite well without us for a few days, Dermot. I think that's all right.
Well, it could also be our last ever episode because I'm skydiving in New Zealand, which heights is my biggest fear. I'm absolutely shitting myself. I'm trying to conquer my biggest fear. So, yep. If this is our last ever episode, it's been an absolute joy.
Yes, a bit uncouth with the swearing. You have to rein that in. But again, not skydiving, hugging a man who's skydiving. There is a difference. But anyway,
Well, actually, he would technically be hugging me because I would be on the bottom of him. But all right. Anyway, any final words, Mick?
no, I'm about to lose my battery, so we better get going. Nothing.
Fair enough. All right. Don't forget to subscribe to our channels on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. If you want to follow our socials, you can find us on X at Into the Woods Pod and on Instagram at Into the Woods Pod 10. Thanks for listening. We look forward to doing it again next week. See ya.